welcome to Noonzzz. Here, sleep doesn't come from silence, but from a gentle story. You don't have to fall asleep just yet. Just stay a little longer. Everything will feel lighter soon. They say some places don't exist on any map. Not really. Not in the way you'd expect. You can drive past them 100 times and never see a thing, not a signpost, not a shadow, not even a whisper in the wind, until the day you're lost enough, weary enough, empty enough, and suddenly the road bends where it never bent before. That's how people find the inn, or rather, how it finds them, and that's how you arrived. The sky had already darkened by the time you realized you didn't know where you were. The forest on either side of the road had thickened, swallowing cell signal, GPS, even the sunlight that had once filtered through the branches. The mist had gathered at the edges of your windshield like breath on a mirror. You'd been driving in silence, the radio long gone to static, your thoughts louder than you wanted them to be. Then, without warning, the trees parted and there it was, the moorings inn, set just off the road, nestled in the curve of a small, fog-choked valley. No lights on the highway, no town in sight, no explanation, only a single flickering lantern above a wooden sign carved in old, curling script. Moss clung to the stone gateposts. A rotting arch hung overhead like a question you weren't ready to answer. You almost kept driving, but something in your chest, pulled. Not curiosity exactly, not fear either, something quieter, deeper, like the faint ache of a forgotten name. You turned. The gravel crunched beneath your tires as you pulled into the courtyard, and you realized something odd. There were no other vehicles. Not a single soul in sight, and yet the front windows glowed gold with candlelight, and the chimney exhaled a thin ribbon of smoke into the night. It didn't feel abandoned, it felt expectant. You stepped out of your car. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, tinged with something older, something like dried roses left too long in a drawer. The front door creaked open before you touched it. Standing in the entryway was a man you couldn't quite place in time. He wore a dark vest over a crisp white shirt, his hair salt and pepper, his posture straight but not stiff. His eyes, a grey that nearly matched the mist, studied you not with suspicion, but recognition. He didn't ask your name. He simply said, "Room 9 is ready." And the way he said it, not will be ready, not can be prepared, but is, like it had been waiting, just as the inn had waited, just as the road had curved, just as the fog had known your name long before you'd spoken it. You didn't argue, you didn't ask questions. You signed the ledger. He slid toward you. The guest book felt worn, the leather soft from generations of hands. As your pen moved across the page, you glanced at the names above yours. Faint, fading, almost illegible. One of them, Clara Wilkes, July 3rd, 1970, stood out for no reason you could explain. He handed you a key. It was heavy, real brass, engraved with a delicate number, 9. You'll find what you need, he said quietly. Or perhaps what you lost. You climbed the staircase in silence. The hallway smelled of lavender and old books. Carpet muted your footsteps. Room 9 was the last door at the end, facing a narrow window with no view. Inside, it was warmer than expected. A fire already crackled in the hearth. The bed was turned down. A tea tray waited on the side table, and on the desk, a journal. Your name was written on the inside cover. That night, you didn't dream, but when you awoke, the journal had moved. A new entry had appeared in handwriting you didn't recognize. A date you hadn't lived. A memory you shouldn't have. July 3rd, 1972, room 9. She wore the blue dress again today, the one I liked best, before the water took her away. You stared at the page. Your hand trembled slightly, but you couldn't stop reading. Each word unfurled something inside you. Not fear, not exactly, but the peculiar sensation of recognition without understanding. Like a song you know by heart, though you've never heard it before. And the strangest thing of all, you remembered the blue dress, not from a story, not from a photograph, not from the shoreline, from your hands reaching toward hers, from the moment she turned and smiled. But that memory wasn't yours, was it? You stood, breath-catching, and turned toward the mirror. For a second, just a second, you weren't alone in the reflection. A figure stood behind you. A woman, blurred by time and fog and tears. She wore a blue dress, and she was smiling. There are nights when dreams feel more real than waking life. But what happens when waking life feels like someone else's dream? The morning after your arrival, the world outside your window refuses to move. The fog is still there, thicker, if anything, clinging to the glass like breath that never faded. The trees beyond the window remain unmoving, silhouetted against a sky that forgets the color of dawn. You glance at the clock on the wall. It ticks forward, and yet you feel suspended in a moment that stretches too long. Room 9 smells of old cedarwood and chamomile tea, as if time inside it steeps slowly, gently, without ever fully changing. You sit at the edge of the bed, the journal still open on the desk. That entry, July 3rd, 1972. The blue dress. The C. It doesn't make sense, and yet it aches inside your chest, like something you once knew but chose to forget. You rise and step into the hallway, drawn not by curiosity, but by a strange tug, not of danger, but of unfinished sentences. The inn is quiet, not empty, but hushed, as if it's holding its breath. To your left, a door sits ajar. Room 4. The number hangs crooked, as though it's trying to slip away. You pause. You didn't come here to explore. You didn't come here at all, really. But your hand reaches out. Inside, the room is colder than yours. The curtains are drawn. On the bed lies a red scar, vibrant, delicate, oddly out of place. The scent is different here. Jasmine and ink. And then you notice it. A photograph on the dresser. Framed, black and white. Two figures. A woman with a scarf like this one wrapped around her neck. A man in uniform. Their faces are blurred not by age, but by something stranger. Like the memory of them refuses to settle. You hear the door close behind you. You didn't close it. The room exhales. A rustle, a whisper. No words. Just the soft impression of presence. You don't move. You barely breathe. But your chest tightens with something not quite fear. Not quite sorrow. Recognition, then like a blink, in reverse you see it. A flicker. A memory that isn't yours. You're standing on a platform. A train is leaving. You're waving, or maybe being waved to. You smell coal smoke and the sting of goodbye. The scarf slips from your hand. You jolt back to yourself. The photograph is gone. Only the scarf remains. You step out of the room quickly, the air in the hallway feeling thinner than before. Room 4's door creaks slowly back open on its own, as if it never meant to trap you, only remind you. Downstairs, you find the innkeeper in the dining room, arranging teacups on a tray. He doesn't look surprised to see you. You wondered, he says simply. You nod, you don't explain. There's no point. She never came back, you know, he continues, without looking up. Room 4, Jasmine, that was her name, left the scarf behind, and a bit more than that. You swallow. She left a memory. He finally looks at you. His eyes are not cruel, but neither are they gentle. She left a hole, he replies. You sit in silence. Outside the window, the fog does not lift. He slides a cup of tea toward you. Earl Grey, with a slice of lemon, floating like a fading sun. Rooms here aren't just rooms, he says, almost to himself. They're echoes. And sometimes echoes pull too hard. You don't ask what he means. Not yet. But you know the question is coming. He sets down the tray. You're not the first, he says. And you won't be the last. The inn remembers everyone, especially those who forget themselves. You stare into your cup. The lemon turns slowly. But why me? He studies you for a long moment. And then he smiles, a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Because, he says, something in you is missing. And this place, it remembers what you've buried. Before you can reply, the front door opens. A woman steps in, soaked from the rain. Her eyes flick toward you just briefly, but you feel it all the way in your spine. She hesitates, then asks the innkeeper, room 8. He nods. She walks up the stairs without another word. You sit in silence, but your mind is racing. Room 8 is right next to yours, and you've been hearing footsteps at night before you fell asleep. Only now do you realize they weren't yours. It begins again that night. The footsteps. You hear them just as the fire in room 9 begins to fade. As your body is sinking toward sleep, but your mind hovers in that strange twilight space where memory and dream begin to blur. At first, they're soft, padded, measured, like someone walking slowly past your door with no clear destination, just pacing the hallway out of habit, or maybe out of need. You keep your eyes closed, heart slowing, letting the sound pass. But tonight, they don't pass. They pause, right outside your room. There's a hush, the kind that doesn't belong to silence, but to presence. As if someone is standing just inches from the other side of the door, listening, not moving, not knocking, just there. Your breath catches, something in your chest tightens, not out of fear, but out of recognition. You know that rhythm, the pause, the silence wrapped around it. You've heard it before once, years ago, in a hallway with peeling paint and warm yellow light, but that place is gone, burned down, or maybe just forgotten. You sit up in the dark, feet touching the soft rug below. The fire behind you crackles low. Your hand reaches for the doorknob, not because you're brave, but because you can't not open it. When you do, the hallway is empty, still, except this time, the air carries a faint perfume, something floral, warm, lingering. Your eyes shift to the door across from yours. Room 8. That's where the woman had gone earlier, the one who entered in silence, asked for nothing but a key, and vanished up the stairs. You hesitate. The hallway presses in like breath held too long. Then, just as you're about to return to your room, the door to room 8 opens. She stands there, robe tied at the waist, hair slightly damp, eyes shadowed but alert. She looks at you without surprise, as if she expected this moment, as if it had already happened. I wondered when you'd come, she says. You blink. Do we know each other? She studies you for a moment before answering. Not yet, she replies. But we've met in all the ways that matter. That answer should disturb you, unsettle you. But instead, something inside you exhales, as if you've just taken a seat in a memory that always had your name on it. She steps back slightly, allowing you in. Her room is colder than yours. The curtains are drawn, and the fire hasn't been lit. A kettle whistles softly from a corner stove. On the desk sits a mirror, its glass clouded, like breath on silver, refusing to show a true reflection. You step in without speaking. She pours 2 cups of tea without asking. The scent is strong lavender, maybe, or something older. Room 8 always does this, she murmurs. It remembers everything, especially the parts I'd rather forget. You glance at her. You're not new here, are you? She smiles faintly. No one ever really arrives at this place. We return. You sip the tea. It's warm but oddly familiar, like a flavor from childhood you thought you'd made up. She sets her cup down. You've started dreaming, haven't you? She asks. You hesitate, then nod. About the sea, a train, a woman in a blue dress. Things I've never seen, and yet they ache. You look up. Her voice is low, almost reverent. You whisper, like they belong to me. She reaches to the nightstand and pulls out a journal. Your breath stutters. It's identical to the one in your room. She flips it open and shows you a page. You know the words before she speaks them. She wore the blue dress again today, before the sea took her away. Your voice is barely audible. That's from mine too. She looks at you, searching for something behind your eyes. You wrote it, she says gently, back then, when you were still him. Your blood turns to ice. I don't understand. She doesn't push. She closes the journal, slowly, like tucking a story back into its shell. You don't need to understand yet, she says, but you do need to remember, piece by piece. You glance toward the mirror. Something flickers across the foggy surface. Not light, not shadow. A figure. Female, barely visible, dressed in blue. You feel yourself walking toward it, cup forgotten in your hand. Her face is obscured by fog, but her presence is undeniable. You raise your fingertips toward the glass. Behind you, the woman's voice softens. She comes at night, always around this time. Who is she? You whisper. She's who you left behind. The mirror pulses. Your reflection distorts for just a second. In that instant, you're no longer alone in your body. You see a shoreline. You see two people, one waving, the other not waving back. You see yourself, but not this version of you. Someone older, wearier, wearing the same sadness behind his eyes. You recoil, breathing hard. She's trying to wake you up, the woman says, because if you don't remember who you were, she looks down. Someone else will take your place. And just as the words leave her lips, the mirror cracks. Not fully, not loudly, just enough. Enough to remind you that time in this inn is not kind, not linear, not safe, and that whatever you came here to forget is not finished with you yet. The mirror doesn't shatter. It fractures. A single elegant line, like a silver vein, spreads across the glass, catching the light just enough to remind you it's real, that something inside it has shifted, that whatever boundary existed before is no longer whole. You stand frozen in room 8, staring at that narrow crack. The woman watches you from the corner of the room, her hands wrapped around her teacup, knuckles pale. She's opening it, she says softly. You don't ask who. You already know. Your own reflection blurs at the edges, bending around the crack like water disturbed by a pebble. Behind that shimmer, the figure in the blue dress is still there. Closer now. Her face is still obscured, but her hand is raised, palm open against the glass, mirroring yours. You lift your hand without thinking. Your fingers align, and in that moment, the glass warms beneath your skin, not heat, exactly, but a deep hum, like a vibration tuned to something inside your ribs. Your breath catches. The woman behind you rises. Don't force it, she warns. Let it remember you first. You blink. Let it remember me. She nods. Mirrors in this place don't reflect what you are. They reflect what you left behind. The crack trembles again. You hear something, not from the room, not from the hallway, from inside the mirror. A voice, your voice but different, older, worn. I should have told her. 3 seconds. 4, then another whisper. I should have stayed. You stagger back, heart racing. The woman steadies you. Her hands are warm, steady. I heard myself, you say, but I didn't say those things. She meets your eyes, not in this life. You want to laugh, to push back, to retreat into logic, but the mirror doesn't lie, it only reveals. You sit heavily on the edge of the bed, running a hand through your hair. What is this place? She exhales. A threshold, she says, between lives, between selves, between what we remember and what we refuse to. And you ask, are you like me? Her expression softens. I was like you, she says. Before I remembered, she walks over to the desk, opens the top drawer, and pulls out an object. She places it in your palm. A watch, old, gold-rimmed. The leather band cracked at the edges. When you flip it over, your breath catches. Your name engraved in small cursive letters on the back. Except, it's not the name you go by now. It's a name you haven't heard in years. A childhood nickname, long buried. Something only one person ever called you. Her. You. Look up. Where did you get this? It was left behind in room 9. The last time you were here. I've never. She cuts you off gently. You have. Just not in this skin. You stare at the watch. The ticking is faint, but steady. The room feels smaller. The mirror larger. Outside, the wind has picked up. The inn creaks with the weight of remembering. You walk slowly to the mirror again. The crack has spread slightly. Through it, the figure's features are becoming clearer. Dark hair, eyes too wide with waiting, a smile that doesn't belong to any ghost. I know her, you whisper. I just don't know how. She knows you too, the woman says from behind. But only if you let her in. You look back at her. Will it hurt? She pauses, then nods. Only the parts of you that tried to forget. You take a breath, then place your full hand against the mirror. The room dissolves, not explodes, not vanishes. It dissolves like ink dropped in water. The fire, the bed, the tea, gone. The woman fading like mist. And suddenly, you're standing somewhere else, our shoreline, late afternoon. Wind lifting grains of sand like whispers. The sea is grey-blue and endless. You look down. You're holding a pair of shoes in your hand. Barefoot, your feet remember the feel of wet sand. So does your heart. Ahead, a woman stands with her back to you. The blue dress moves in the breeze, like it's breathing. You try to call her name, but you don't know what it is. Still, she turns, she sees you, and smiles. The sand is cold beneath your feet. That's the first thing you notice, not the sky, not the waves, not even the woman in the blue dress, standing just a few paces ahead. It's the texture of wet sand between your toes, the way it clings to your soles, as if trying to keep you rooted in a place you don't yet remember. You're not dreaming, not anymore. You are inside a memory, not someone else's, your own. And the woman, you knew her once, before everything went quiet inside you. She hasn't turned around yet, but even from behind, the tilt of her shoulders pulls at something familiar in your chest. The blue dress flutters just like it did in the mirror, weightless, patient, as if it's been waiting for years to breathe again. You take one cautious step forward, then another. She speaks without turning. You're late. Her voice cuts through the wind like a knife wrapped in silk. You swallow hard. I didn't know how to get back. Now she turns, and you remember, not just her face, the way her eyes narrowed when she teased you, the way her smile curled with defiance, but the feeling of her. Her name forms silently on your lips before you say it out loud. Eleanor. She says nothing, just watches you. The ocean roars behind her, but your world has narrowed to the space between your bodies. You want to move closer, but something holds you back. Guilt, maybe, or fear of what she'll say next. You remember now, she says. You nod, slowly. Pieces. Eleanor steps closer, then remember all of it. The air thickens. Time folds inward. And just like that, the memory sharpens. You were engaged. Not married yet, because you'd postponed the wedding. Twice. She said she understood, but you knew she didn't. You were obsessed with work, with proving yourself. You'd found something scientific, experimental. It involved memory, cognition, altered states of consciousness. You promised it would change lives. You told her you were close, too close. You'd begun testing it on yourself. Just fragments, dreams. You wanted to control them, delete them, rewrite certain fears. She begged you to stop. You didn't. And then, one night, you made her part of it. Not willingly, not directly, but you recorded one of her dreams. Without her knowing, you told yourself it was for her, to help her with the nightmares. But it wasn't about healing her. It was about proving you could do it. She found out you. Remember now the look on her face. Not betrayal, not even anger. Just silence. The kind that echoes louder than any scream. She left the next morning. You didn't follow her. You buried the memory, erased the file, wrote over the original recording, told yourself it was a misstep, a blur in your otherwise brilliant path. But part of you never let go. That's why the inn pulled you back. Eleanor speaks again, her voice quieter now. I trusted you, with things I didn't even trust myself to say out loud. You lower your gaze. I know. You didn't just take a memory, she says. You took how I felt inside it, and left me with the shell. You can't deny it. You don't try to. She steps closer, now only a breath away. So why come back now? You lift your head. Her eyes search yours, tired, sad, not angry anymore. Because I kept hearing your voice in places you'd never been. Because I'd forget entire hours. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw a door. This door. You gesture behind you, toward where the memory began. The end. She nods. It doesn't let anyone leave until the truth is returned. You look at her. Can I fix it? She hesitates, then says something that lands like stone. You can't undo the taking, but you can carry it. You don't fully understand, but the weight in your chest shifts. Like something long locked away has finally begun to break open. Eleanor reaches into the pocket of her dress. She holds out a small black object. A recorder, not digital, old, tape-fed. You recognize it instantly. It was yours. The very first model you used in your research. It survived, she says, even when you didn't. Your hand closes around it slowly. It's cold, heavier than you remember. Inside is the last recording, she says. The night you took it, I never listened to it. I didn't want to hear myself without feeling myself. You look down. I'm sorry, I know, she says. But that's not what the inn needs. You glance up. Then what? To listen. You don't move for a long time, but eventually your thumb slides across the button. Click. A hiss. Then her voice, soft, unfiltered. I had the dream again. I was on a beach, barefoot, holding nothing. He was there, but he wouldn't come closer. He just watched. I called to him, but my voice didn't reach. You stopped the tape. Tears prick the back of your eyes. When you look up, Eleanor is gone. Only the waves remain, and the doorway hovering in the air ahead of you, framed in flickering gold. Just like the entrance to the inn. Your hand tightens around the recorder. This time, you step through. You wake in a room that doesn't feel like memory. There are no mirrors, no fog, no echoes of the inn. Only cold light, the mechanical hum of monitors, a beeping sound that fills the silence with something steady but empty. You blink up at a hospital ceiling. Then you turn your head, and you see her. Eleanor. The real Eleanor. Not the vision, not the echo, not the woman in the blue dress haunting the edge of your guilt. She's here, lying in a narrow bed, body still beneath white sheets. Wires trail from her arms. An oxygen tube curves across her face. Her lips are slightly parted. Her chest rising and falling, not from will but from machinery. It feels like being hit in the chest with the truth. The weight of it pins you in place. This isn't a dream. This isn't a metaphor. This is the consequence. You stand, legs trembling, and cross the space between you, every step slower than the last. Her face is pale, too pale. Her lashes barely touch her cheeks. There's no twitch of recognition, no shift in breathing as you reach for her hand, and yet her hand is warm. Alive, but unreachable. You sit beside her, carefully, like she'll vanish if you move too fast. Your voice, when it comes, sounds like someone else's. Eleanor. She doesn't stir. You look down at your own hands. You barely recognize them now. These are the hands that once built something brilliant, then used it to take what never belonged to them. The hands that recorded a dream, not to help, but to prove something. You grip her hand tighter, guilt burning beneath your ribs. I remember, you whisper. I remember every second I tried to erase. The silence is unbearable. I told myself I was protecting you, that I was helping. But really I just couldn't stand not knowing what you felt. I wanted access. I wanted proof. Your throat tightens. You were never a subject, but I treated you like one. The machines beep on. You press her hand to your forehead. I broke something in you. Something I couldn't see on a scan. Couldn't measure in numbers. And then I left. I let others watch you fade while I hid in my research, in silence, in denial. Your voice cracks. I lied to everyone, but worst of all, I lied to myself. Tears sting your eyes. You don't wipe them. I thought the damage would stay in the dream. That when I deleted the file, it was over. You look up at her face again. But you carried it. You carried what I took. The fear, the loss, the fragmentation. While I kept chasing some new breakthrough, you open your hand. In your palm is the broken recorder. Its casing cracked. The tape barely hanging on. The object that started it all. You place it beside her on the nightstand, as if laying down a weapon. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But if there's a part of you still hears some small voice, still trapped inside, I want you to hear this. I am not here to fix it. I'm here to witness it. All of it. Without turning away. You lean closer, and I will never take from you again. Silence. Only the machines continue their rhythm, steady and mechanical. Then, something changes. A flicker on the monitor. The heartbeat skips. You freeze. Look up. She hasn't moved. Not a finger. Not an eyelid. But a single tear begins to slide down her cheek. You stare at it, barely breathing. Not imagined, not dreamt, real. Your hand shakes as you reach for her face, gently catching the tear on your fingertip. And that's when the full horror lands like ice in your lungs. She felt everything. She's been here. Awake, trapped inside a body that couldn't respond. Hearing, sensing, waiting, drowning in the silence you left behind. You stagger back in the chair, nearly choking on the realization that you didn't just harm her, you left her in a prison built from your ambition. Your apology crumbles on your tongue. What words could ever meet that kind of pain? You return to her side and take her hand again, this time with both of yours, holding on like it's the only thread left between you. I'm so sorry, you whisper, not for what I did, but for making you carry it alone. Still no response, but the beeping evens out again. And you swear for just a moment you see her brow shift, almost imperceptibly, as if something deep inside is stirring. Then her lips part, dry still, but moving. One word forms in the silence, your name. Not the one you give to the world, but the name only she ever used. Soft, intimate, real. And it lands, like a prayer you never deserved. You wait by the door, breath held like it might shatter if released too soon. Inside, beyond the pale green curtains, Eleanor is waking. The doctors said her vitals were improving. That she opened her eyes briefly. That she even murmured something under her breath. But none of that prepares you for this moment, because now she's conscious, and you don't know which version of you she remembered. When the nurse lets you in, the room smells like antiseptic and ironed cotton sheets. A tray of untouched food sits on the rolling table. The blinds are half closed, slanting strips of dusk across her bed. She's sitting up, awake, and she sees you at first. There's only the kind of stillness that comes right before a storm. Her face, once soft with dreams, now holds something tight, alert, wary. Her eyes flick over you, not in recognition, but in evaluation, not warmth assessment. Eleanor, you stop. The name sounds too soft in your mouth now. She doesn't reply. You take a slow step forward. You're awake. You try again. They didn't think. Her voice slices through yours. Don't finish that sentence. It's low, unsteady, but real. You freeze, watching her eyes narrow, not with confusion, but clarity. Cold, painful clarity. I didn't forget you, she says, voice raspy. Not for a single second. Even when they told me I wouldn't come back. Her hands tremble slightly on the blanket. You want to step closer, help steady her, but you don't dare. She isn't done. I heard everything. I saw you. In pieces. In echoes. You would come in, check the machines, whisper apologies, and I was screaming inside, but no one heard me, not even you. Your throat tightens. I didn't know you were alive. She interrupts, voice sharper now. I was. You just couldn't hear me. Or maybe you didn't want to. You flinch. She leans forward slightly. The movement, fragile but firm. Do you remember the night you first used the recorder? You nod, slowly. The night I dreamed of the lake, she continues. The one from my childhood. Your heart sinks. I told you that dream in trust. I told you because I thought, if someone else could see it, maybe I could finally stop being afraid of it. She looks straight into you now, voice trembling, not from weakness, but from fury barely restrained. And you took it, not to help, not to heal, but to test, to dissect. You try to speak. She doesn't let you. Do you know what it felt like? She says, to be inside that memory again, over and over, but unable to move. Every time I reached the end of the dock in the dream, I couldn't wake up. I couldn't turn away. I couldn't breathe. You shake your head. I didn't know. You never asked. Her voice rises, for the first time cracking the calm. You never once stopped to ask if I wanted you to enter that space. You barged in like it belonged to you. Like my most private fear was yours to archive. You look down, ashamed, and then she says it. I trusted you more than anyone, and you made me a subject in your experiment. The words are too sharp to touch. I didn't come here to be forgiven, you murmur. I came because I had to face what I did. She breathes, slow and shallow. You know what hurts most? She asks. Not the fear, not the dream, not even the coma. She closes her eyes for a beat. It's knowing that while I was lost, inside myself, the man I loved was turning my suffering into notes and files and metrics. You used my hand, called it care. There's no reply. There can't be, so she finishes. I want you to leave. You look up. She doesn't waver. Leave. Not just the room. Not just this hospital. Leave me out of whatever redemption arc you're building for yourself. Your voice barely makes it out. Eleanor, she shakes her head. Don't say my name like it still belongs in your mouth. And just before you turn, she adds, if you really regret what you did, don't try to be part of my healing. Let me do it without the person who broke me watching from the front row. You nod, not because you're okay but because she is right. And as the door closes behind you, the sound is softer than the finality it carries. But you know, you should. No. This is not punishment, it's justice. And now, the only thing left for you to do is become the kind of man she never has to fear again. You return to the lab, not as a scientist, not as the man who once built a machine to listen to dreams, but as someone stripped of illusion. Gone is the clean pride that used to guide your fingers on the keyboard. What's left is silence, the kind that follows ruin, the kind you earned. The lab hasn't changed, but you have. You unlock the system you once vowed no one would breach, not even yourself. Layer by layer, the archive opens before you. Lines of code, encrypted memory files, voices sealed in digital chambers, each one a person, each one a story you once believed you had the right to collect. And now you understand why. Eleanor looked at you like that. You didn't just take, you unwrote. You sit down in front of the core interface, where the memory mapping software lives. A curved screen displays what you used to call dream structure lattice, spidery network of luminous strands, each one connected to synaptic pulses, time-stamped emotional surges, fragments of light and sound tied together in fragile logic. In theory, this was brilliant. In truth, it was blind. You begin decoding one of the oldest files, patient 0049, no name, just the number. The lattice lights, upright in the center, fragmented along the edges. Your algorithms once ignored the broken strands, favoring only patterns that could be interpreted linearly. But that was the mistake. Real trauma doesn't unfold like narrative. It folds, bends, repeats. You switch to manual mode. You start listening, not to what is said, but to what breaks the pattern. A hallway, over and over. The sound of running feet. The echo of a door that never opens. There's no voice until the 15th loop. If anyone hears me, please tell my mum I didn't mean to run away. You pause, rewind, slow it down. What you missed back then, what your old filters discarded as noise, was a tremor in her voice that reveals a change in heartbeat, a neurological flare that only occurs during real-time recall. This wasn't just memory. This was a cry for help. You feel your stomach twist. Your hands move faster now, not to extract, but to reconstruct. You restore the discarded waveforms, reverse the suppression layers, your own code applied to incoherent data. And, suddenly, a new lattice emerges, messier, real. You realize The pain never left the structure. You just programmed your system to ignore it. Your breath hitches. You've been calling this restoration, but it's not. It's atonement. You finalize the sequence, an unedited, fully restored emotional memory file. You export it clean, whole, a voice, not a sample, a person, not a project. You track her down, the girl from that hallway, now 17, in a long-term care facility, diagnosed with persistent dissociation. Her mother visits weekly but speaks as if her daughter's already gone. You ask for 5 minutes, not to fix anything, just to return what was taken. You sit across from the girl. Her eyes are empty, until you play the file. The moment her voice echoes back at her, something shifts. She blinks, once, then again. Her hand flutters, grips the armrest. Her lips part not to speak, but to breathe differently. And when it ends, she turns her head. Slowly. Was that me? Her mother gasps, hands flying to her mouth. You nod. You were reaching out. I didn't know how to hear you. I do now. The mother breaks down quietly. The girl doesn't cry. She smiles, small, fragile, real. That night, you walk alone. Not in guilt, not anymore. In responsibility. You pass by Eleanor's clinic by coincidence or so you tell yourself. Through the glass, you glimpse her inside. Notebook open, lips pressed together in thought. Stronger than the last time, wiser, wounded, still but walking forward. You don't enter, but as you turn to leave, you see her eyes lift. They meet yours. Briefly, no warmth, but no hatred either. And that's enough. The next morning, a package arrives at your building. Inside is a dream map, not printed, hand-drawn. It's Eleanor's stitched back from shreds, and in the center, a new phrase written in her old curved handwriting. If you ever want to learn how to listen, start here. You arrive 15 minutes early. The rooftop is quiet, almost too quiet. The scent of lemon mint drifts from the planters near the edge. From here, the city hums like a dream you've half forgotten, constant, but far away. She chose this place. You didn't ask why. Maybe because it's somewhere without memories. When Eleanor appears, she wears a dark slate sweater and carries a worn notebook under one arm. Her hair is tied loosely, and the late sunlight catches along her shoulders like a thin veil. She doesn't walk fast. She doesn't look around. She just finds the bench beneath the bougainvillea vines and sits. You follow a few steps behind, and you sit not beside her, but not too far either. No one says anything. The wind stirs the leaves above you. A sparrow pecks at something invisible on the tiles. Then, finally, she speaks. Her voice is soft but sharp. I dreamed of the dock again. Your breath stills. It wasn't the same, she continues. This time, I stood at the edge. The water was black. Still, I didn't move forward, didn't step back. I just stood there and listened to the wind. She turns to face you, not angry, not tender. I used to think that dream meant I was afraid, that I needed to be rescued. A small pause, but maybe I just needed silence. She reaches into her notebook and unfolds a small hand-drawn map. You recognize it immediately. A memory lattice net generated by code, but sketched by hand. The lines aren't perfect, the symmetry isn't scientific, but there's something in the intersections, something alive. You once told me memory was like water, she says. Always moving, impossible to hold. She taps the drawing lightly, but I think it's more like roots, slow, quiet, reaching deeper when no one's watching. She places the paper between you. I'm not giving this to you. I'm taking it back. The air seems thinner now. You feel it press against your ribs. I want you to delete everything, she says, still not looking at you. Every file, every copy, every trace. If there's anything left in your system, erase it. You nod. I already have, but I'll check again. I'll make sure. She nods once, like she expected that. Then she takes out a slim envelope. I recorded something last night, she says. Not for your archives, not for science, just for me. She holds the envelope out to you. I want you to have it, not to study it. Just to know it exists. To remember that I stood up again. You take it gently. Your hands are shaking, but not from fear. From the understanding that this is not forgiveness. This is a boundary. I won't open it, you say, unless you want me to. Maybe, someday, she replies quietly. A gust of wind catches one of the loose pages in her notebook. It flips up, then settles again. She stands. You do too. The distance between you isn't grief anymore. It isn't healing either. It's just space, clean, unfinished. I won't carry your guilt, she says, and you won't disappear into mine. The last light of day catches her eyes, making them shine like dew. Then she turns away. She doesn't look back, and for the first time, neither do you, because this time, both of you understand. To truly leave each other, you have to walk away without taking anything with you. The envelope sits on your desk for 3 days. You don't touch it. You don't even glance at it for long. Not because you've forgotten, but because you remember too well. You spend those days shutting the system down. For real, this time. Not just unplugging the servers or deleting backup drives. You dismantle the framework, the code, the hierarchy, the silent channels that you once used to trace, to collect, to decode fragments of human minds. Each click feels like a nail driven into a casket you built. Each line of code, a mirror you can no longer hide behind. You don't do it with pride. You do it because it's the only thing left to do right. On the 4th night, the wind changes. It smells like something turning dot. So you pick up the envelope. The seal isn't perfect, just a soft fold. No glue. She left it that way on purpose. Not an invitation, not a trap, just an open door. You slip the tape into the last player in your office. Old, dusty, real dot, no digital rendering, no waveform analysis, no filters, just her voice. If you're hearing this, I guess I changed my mind. A soft inhale, a pause, I wasn't going to record anything. I thought, what's the point? You already took so much. Why should I give you anything more? But then I remembered something. You lean forward. There was a night, I think I was 12. I had a fever. I kept waking up thinking I was somewhere else. A river, a forest, a corridor with too many doors. My mother held my hand and said, "It's okay, you're just dreaming." But I remember thinking, no, I'm remembering. A shaky laugh. Even now, I'm not sure where the memory ends and the dream begins. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we don't need to separate them anymore. You asked me once what it felt like losing pieces of yourself slowly. I didn't answer then. A beat. The sound of a pen scratching paper. It felt like drowning in a mirror. Every time I looked at myself, there were fewer reflections left, and the ones that remained weren't mine. Your throat tightens, but here's the strange part. After all of it, after everything you did, still dream, I still feel, I still remember. Another pause. Quieter now. I don't know if I forgive you. I probably don't. But I think maybe I understand why you started. Why you couldn't stop. You were trying to fix something in yourself. You just looked for it in other people's minds. You close your eyes. Her words strike deep because they're not cruel, they're true. So here's what I want you to do. Not for me, for you. Remember who you were before you started running. Before you touched other people's pain like it was data. Remember that you were a boy once, scared, trying to hold on to something after losing too much. Go back to that boy. Sit beside him. Let him cry if he needs to. And when he's done, tell him it's okay to remember, even the bad parts. Silence, then that's all. Double quotes, click. End. You sit in the dark long after the tape stops spinning. The wind taps at the window. A dog barks faintly somewhere below. For the first time in years, you don't feel the urge to record this moment. You don't want to capture it, you just want to feel it. You take the envelope, tape still inside, and carry it to the rooftop. The same bench, the same vines, only now the city isn't distant, it's close, breathing with you. You slide the tape beneath the flower pot by the bench, not as evidence, not as guilt, as a seed, and you leave it there, for someone else, for someday, for no reason at Olix, for no reason at Olix, that you were here.